Good evening and welcome to the Australian College of Applied Professions first industry and alumni event of 2024. My name is Kerry Tucker. I'm the Melbourne Student Engagement Manager for ACAP and tonight's MC. I'm joined by Cassie Watson, Melbourne Campus Industry and Alumni Advisor, who is a host for our online audience of about 200 attendees. And Cassie is assisted by Damien Thompson, who is based in Sydney. Our event is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. So some housekeeping before we start. There'll be ample time for Q&A with Vicky and Johanna. Cassie and I will field your questions after the presentation. Cassie will also email your attendance certificates and the presentation slides in the next week or two. I'd now like to introduce our first guest presenter, Professor Vicky Hutton, Chair of Discipline of Counselling at ACAP. Vicky joined the ACAP Melbourne campus in 2013. After working in the health and community sectors as a counsellor, crisis counsellor and group facilitator, Vicky moved into teaching and research at Monash University while completing her PhD in applied psychology. She's worked on research projects in the areas of mental health, quality of life, HIV and AIDS, stigma and discrimination, social cohesion, racism and cyber racism. Vicky remains a long-term counsellor at Southway Counselling Centre, a service established more than 20 years ago to provide affordable counselling to the community. So please welcome Vicky.
Thanks, Kerry. And thank you everybody for being here today on quite a stormy evening in Victoria, and I believe the same in Sydney. So we're very appreciative of everyone who's here. So today I'd like to welcome Johanna de Wever, CEO of PACFA. But before I hand over to Johanna, I just want to give a little brief history of the shared history that both had over the years. And I've been lucky enough to be part of that over the last 11 years. Don't know where it went, but so I have had a lot to do in that time. But just rewind to 1983, when ACAP started in this tiny little office in Sydney. A man called Cliff Moore had a dream to bring counselling, make counselling a practical profession that was respected. So tiny little office, had 10-week diplomas in counselling and psychotherapy. After about 6 years, he handed that over to someone called Lionel Davis. He had a bigger dream and he continued that. He revised the curriculum, advertised the courses on campus and distance education, if you remember distance ed, and students enrolled. Counselling was back in business. First offices in Melbourne were very similar, tiny, very, very cramped, busy, and people there did a bit of everything. So everyone knew everyone's job, which these days, it's not often that way. As demand grew, ACAP moved around, adopted a few other things. We had psychology and criminology came along. We adopted them and we ended up in Lonsdale Street. Some of you may have been to the Lonsdale Street campus, and now we're in these lovely, bright, shiny premises, and we are here to stay. So we also have campuses, as you probably, well, I know you know, we were discussing that, campuses in Perth, Adelaide, Sydney, Byron Bay and Brisbane, all evolving from one person, two people dream to develop a practical hands-on counsel and training. But go back to Lionel Davis, sitting in his little office in Sydney. His vision, as I said, was to provide practical skills for students that they could immediately apply in the workplace. That's a legacy that we continue today, that we pride ourselves on students who finish the counselling courses, they're work ready, they've got skills, they've done their field placement. Lionel Davis adopted what we call an experiential adult education model, and that focused on both personal development And as I said, practical hands-on experience, particularly through the field placement. And counselling training really started to gather momentum then. I was browsing some old course guides when I was just preparing for this bit of nostalgia, and I was reminded of the old distance education, paper-based study materials, divided into 12 sections, undertaken over 12 weeks, and students would sit out there. Poster used to come more than every other day, had mail every day, and learning was through textbook reading activities and interaction with your tutor by phone, and if you had email, by email. Far cry from what we offered. But so by the early 2000s, ACAP had gained approval for what we call higher education provider status. And then in 2017, ACAP gained self-accrediting authority within the higher education standards framework. Counselling had really become a force to be reckoned with. But during this time, that very brief history, PACFA was also emerging as through the collaboration of a group of academics committed to professionalising counselling and psychotherapy. PACFA story isn't mine to tell. Johanna will be dealing with that. But what I do want to point out is that across the years, we've shared so many people between ACAP and PACFA, and we continue to share people as well. And we're all working to the same thing, making sure we've got the community is well serviced by qualified professional counsellors. I couldn't possibly name all the people we've shared, but Dr. Ione Lewis, one of the early presidents of PACFA. She was also Professor of Counselling and Psychotherapy and Head of School of Counselling, so my job at ACAP, over a decade ago. Today there's Nigel Polak. He's the current president of PACFA, and he's one of our valued clinical supervisors who you may be lucky enough to have him supervise you when you go out on field placement. There was also Andrew Little, Principal Executive of ACAP from 2006 until his death in 2016. He was also an important member of PACFA Course Accreditation Committee, just to name one thing. ACAP's annual teaching award, which is underway at the moment, bears his name, and it's in recognition of the work he did in tertiary education that really focused on counselling, psychotherapy, professional education. But what was great about Andrew, he was active in professional counselling associations in Australia and Asia Pacific, but he proved that a person could contribute at a management level, an academic level, and also simultaneously retain that connection to what it means to be a counsellor. And as such, he helped consolidate the discipline of counselling at ACAP that you see today. Many of the past and present office bearers at PACFA have shared their expertise with students, either as full-time academics with us or sessional academics seeking to contribute to the next generation of counsellors. I think that's an important point to remember. Both ACAP and PACFA people know what it's like to be out on the field, on the front line, in effect. We know that counselling and psychotherapy are two of the most exciting professions you could enter, but also professions that bear huge responsibilities and ethical obligations. When I was looking back over past documents, again, to prepare for this, I became quite nostalgic at some of the names I saw. I've had the privilege to work with many of the ACAP and PACFA shared visionaries and educators over the years. And I believe the ongoing collaboration between ACAP and PACFA continues to benefit our students and the community in general. I've also been fortunate to go through some course reaccreditations with PACFA over the years. Course reaccreditation is rigorous, some might say daunting, but one we gladly undertake to further strengthen the counselling profession. Enough from me, you've come here to listen to Johanna. So I have the pleasure of handing over to Johanna de Wever, CEO of PACFA, to explain more about. Oh, sorry.
No, that's
I'm not
okay.
supposed to introduce.
No problem. I'll take that first one. Thank you, thank
You get
you.
a double introduction.
There you go. I just thought I'd do exactly the same. And thank you, Professor Hutton, for that. I'd like now to introduce Johanna de Weaver, CEO of the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, PACFA. Johanna has worked in advocacy, communications and membership for not-for-profit organisations for 20 years and was appointed as CEO in March 2021. She is responsible for implementing an operational plan to support the achievement of PACFA's strategic goals. So I'd like to welcome Johanna to the lecture.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. And Vicky, what a wonderful insight into the connection between PACFA and at the heart of counselling are people and relationships. So I think that's a really lovely way for us to start. Quickly, I will just introduce myself so you see how I fit into the puzzle. My name is Johanna and I have the embarrassment of not being a counsellor. I have worked in advocacy and membership for 20 years, as you said. And part of that has been working with health and welfare organisations to use the levers of policy, advocacy, and communications to strategically move them to where they want to be. So I've worked with the Society of Hospital Pharmacists to change legislation related to opioid dispensing and keep the community safer. I worked with the Brothers of St Lawrence to introduce the child dental benefit to help lower income people afford better dental care for their children. I worked with the College of Psychiatrists on the appalling premature mortality of people with really serious mental health issues. So you can see that these are all different jobs, working with different groups of people. But when I had the opportunity to come to PACFA, I did so because I was really excited about what this profession has to offer to the sector and to the community. And also because there was a little part of me that was like, excellent, why haven't I heard more about that recently? So I'll start by talking about, in my presentation, I'll talk about my optimism and the excitement I feel for the sector at the moment. But thank you. So I'll point this in the right direction. No, I'm not pointing in the right direction. Oh, it's not on. There you go. You want to come and... I can use this button.
Sorry, it was fine just before, so.
It's on to sleep on me.
Probably.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, it's just stopped. Okay. All right. So first, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land that we are on today, and pay respect to their elders and to any people here today who might be Indigenous. In PACFA, that has a very special place because we have the College of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Healing Practices. So we were particularly connected and respectful of our country. Now, that's one of the newest things that PACFA's done. PACFA's been on a journey, like most organisations, over the last 30 years. And we were originally started as a consortium of volunteer-led membership organisations who had been in this space for 20 or 30 years. The profession of counselling has actually been around in Australia for a very, very long time. PACFA was a very big strategic step to bring those organisations together so that they could communicate more effectively with one voice. We started with more than 30 and we still have some of those organisations now. From the very beginning, we aimed to provide reassurance to the broader community about the standards of our membership. So training and accreditation has always been important to us, but equally a sense of professional belonging and identity. So we work through resources and development and documentation to support the members to achieve what they need to achieve. But we also speak outwardly to other people about counselling and psychotherapy in a way that meets their needs around the custodianship of the quality assurance for the profession. I can see there that we've got that we are the leading peak body for tertiary qualified professionals, and I think that's a really important point. The reality is that PACFA has the highest standards for registration in counselling and psychotherapy, and we always have had. And that goes to the fact that we see that the work that our members do is very important. And with important work comes responsibility. And so we see it as PACFA's job is to work with government and to work with the profession and to work with employers to try and help intermesh those expectations and make sure that everyone's on the same page so that we can effectively advocate for the sector. So courses accredited with PACFA, like the ones that you're doing through ACAP, meet those requirements. But we also meet those requirements through our registration standards, through our CPD, through our code of ethics, through all the other things that we do. So advocacy is very much a multi-pronged approach to these things. Graduates from non-accredited courses can join PACFA as individual registrants, but they have to go through a much more onerous process, if I'm honest. There's more documentation, there's more checking, and it involves a full kind of vetting of the curriculum that they have studied. So the benefit of being with accredited courses, you don't have to do that. It's also slightly cheaper when it comes down to it. So our mission is to regulate and support the provision of effective, high-quality psychotherapy, counselling and Indigenous healing practices. And I think it's important that people get the word in there, regulate. So as you may be aware, that counselling and psychotherapy are a self-regulated profession. And that's actually quite a contrast to many, many other health professions, even though self-regulation itself is common among allied health professions. Everyone is frequently talking about APRA and the role of APRA. The reality is for self-regulated professions, we don't have APRA. So we need to create and hold standards for ourselves that those same funding bodies can have absolute confidence in. Okay, and so part of PACFA's job is to do that on behalf of our members. And that involves things like audits, assessment, registration. We recently were the first counselling body to bring in a requirement for a criminal history check. Everything that we can do so that employers can have absolute confidence in our members. Now, one of the interesting things about working in the sector, I must admit, when I finished high school, I never thought that I'd spend 20 years in health membership organisations, which sounds a little obscure, doesn't it? Is the dynamicism of this particular area of work. So I find healthcare fascinating. I am not personally skilled enough to do the kind of work that you will be doing when you graduate and you sit with people and you support them in incredibly difficult times of their lives. And I have amazing respect for that. The flip side is that what I do is I work with the organisations who help make that happen for you. Now, one of the things that people often don't know about healthcare is that pretty much every healthcare profession has a membership body as well as a registration body, as well as APRA. And that membership body is fundamentally run by volunteers. And those volunteers give up their time and energy after work, on the weekends, to set the standards for the sector. Because otherwise, where would those standards be? You know, government doesn't know enough about the individual sectors to set those standards. You don't want to have random professionals going around talking about things that they don't do. So I often think that the community undervalues our health professionals and doesn't understand that not only do they do their job, but they also have this important role in organisations like PACFA. PACFA is a volunteer-run organisation. You know, our board is all unpaid. They're all coming down to Melbourne at the end of February, but that's like one trip a year. The rest of it is monthly meetings on Zoom. They put in an incredible amount of time and energy. Nigel Pollack, our president at the moment, who was also a teacher here, meets with me every single week. So we can talk about the strategy and the planning, what's going to happen going forward. You know, these are all leaders of the counselling sector. A lot of them also work as supervisors. They see clients face to face. You would see them at our CPD and around the place as part of the PACFA community. And we aim to really encourage that kind of engagement across the sector, because those relationships are where so much of the value of interprofessional exchange happens, where people learn from each other and continue to develop. And part of our work as an organisation is to listen to the needs of our members. So the creation of CATSIP, the College of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Healing Practices, came about after we were petitioned by members after a presentation at one of our conferences. So it was a very direct case of someone coming to us and saying, what can we do to help address some of the issues that they were seeing in Indigenous communities? And the PACFA approach was, okay, let's take our work with quality assurance and registration and work out how we can use those tools to support the professionalisation of Indigenous healing practitioners, which is what the petitioner wanted us to do. So that's kind of very much a work in progress. We are a not-for-profit with all the requirements that are around reporting to the ACNC and all those kinds of things. Any money that we make through anything is all reinvested in member services. We don't pay dividends. That's not something that ever happens at PACFA. We have a committed staff who work in this area. We are committed to research. And also, I think it's really worth noting, we don't have any commercial interests in any kind of training organisations, and we have very robust governance, which means that any involvement that any volunteer has in training, because naturally people have to hold down jobs and do different things, is all very clearly delineated, recorded, and maintained in our conflict of interest registers. So we take all that kind of thing very seriously. And we do that to the same extent that other organisations do. Nurses, pharmacists, doctors, social workers. These are all the organisations that we want to be regarded as a peer with. And so these are the standards that we need to meet. So what do we offer members? What am I here for you? Well, we are a genuine member-led organisation. You could all join our committees, join our branches. In many cases, you can do some of that from day one. We have a range of different engagement mechanisms that help, that aim to help people talk to each other more, recognising that kind of value of peer engagement and professional development. We have a strong brand with government engagement. There is research that was done last year that showed that PACFA registration was the most commonly sought registration for employers, and that's because our standards are the highest. So our members fit most easily with the multidisciplinary team approach of employers, particularly those dealing with government-funded programs, because the level of expertise that's required is at that professional level. We fundamentally, through our registration, we also work with a whole range of stakeholders to ensure that you are eligible for private health insurance, that you get access to a really good insurance rate through our networks, state insurance, work cover, NDIS, all those kinds of places, and a number of EAPs. Okay, individually, we have a range of services which you can have a look at our website and see them. But we have a range of low-cost supervision options and accreditation for supervisors. We also aim to build the specialisation of the sector, and this is something that I think has been underdone in counselling. So people can disagree with me later if they like. But having come from other sectors, in most areas, the longer you work in a field, the more additional training you take in that field, the greater the recognition, remuneration is that you get. In pharmacy, they have like 38 specialties. If you're a cardiologist, pharmacist, you get to say that you're really, really good at that, and you get to demand extra money for being really, really good at that. One of the things that I find is quite strange in counselling is often just as well. I'm a counsellor. I just got out. I'm the same as a counsellor who's been doing it for 20 years. I'm not going to worry too much about the additional training or the specialisation that comes through. Whereas that's not how healthcare typically works. So PACFA has 6 specialised cap colleges, and 4 of our bigger ones, 3 of our bigger ones are there. But we aim to build those into really strong accreditation focuses, so that people will be able to use those to gain access to government services and rebates, but also to really build their own specialised expertise and really extend and show the practice. Because we know that the workforce has incredible strengths, but it's quite hard for people to demonstrate those if you're looking at the current kind of employment models. Because of our volunteer focus, because we have an enormous number of members who are very, very passionate about their work, we also offer a significant professional development that is developed in-house through our own member base. We offer probably about a CPD every week or fortnight for the year, provided by volunteers across the country, a whole range of different kinds of topics that come through, as well as specialist topics. They're $35, which is pretty cheap for 2 hours of CPD. And then they're available as a free webinar for people afterwards. So they're quite an easy way to keep across what's kind of going on. They're also a really good way of making connections with fellow counsellors or psychotherapists in your area or in an area that you want to work or gain skill at a later time. Okay. We also have access to advanced accredited training that leads to recognition through our colleges in areas like gestalt therapy and psychodrama. And of course, we have a suite of stakeholders that we work through who provide private health insurance rebates, opportunities for employment, opportunities for contract work, opportunities for placement. So there's a whole, there's a raft of some of them are quite pre-existing, quite historic kind of opportunities that have been around, and some of them are really coming through. We've certainly seen since COVID a much greater interest in bringing counsellors into roles that have traditionally been filled by psychologists. And I can talk more about that afterwards if you We trademarked these titles and the branding around them, and we are going to be ramping up this in the next couple of months, and there'll be some quite significant announcements in this space around how PACFA members can promote individually and you know, individually for their own practice and also through their employment, the fact that they have met the highest standards for the sector, the fact that a counsellor is not a counsellor is not a counsellor. That, you know, as a PACFA registration needs to mean more for people who have met those standards. And of course, we are the only counselling organisation who has met the full requirements of Allied Health Professionals Australia and NASRAP, which is the National Alliance of Self-Regulating Health Professions. Now, I know that that all sounds a bit esoteric and kind of woolly, but the reality is these are the bodies that advise government about self-regulating professions. So today I was at a meeting with a whole lot of other organisations talking to the government about their national expanded scope of practice review, which also sounds a bit woolly. But basically that's a conversation that the Assistant Minister for Mental Health, Emma McBride, has set up, trying to make sure that everyone is able to perform in their work everything that they were trained to do. And in counselling, we have a particular problem with this because counsellors are, you know, either omitted from those opportunities in favour of psychologists or they're shuffled down. So for us, this is actually a really significant opportunity, and I was there to advocate for our workforce for tertiary qualified counsellors, and that's specific because when it comes down to it, tertiary qualifications are the entry-level mandate for recognition of an allied health profession. NASRAP is the organisational equivalent that works with PACFA to make sure that we meet those standards. So that kind of gives you a little bit of context. So, as I said, PACFA's registration was identified last year as the most commonly sought by employers. And PACFA, because of our tertiary qualification requirements, is part of the allied health professions aligned with AASW and APS. And I think that's really important as well because it shows where we are positioning the profession. We're not positioning counsellors as like kind of up to psychologists and maybe down over here and a little bit over there. You know, we're not a stretchy profession. They're like, no, this is, you know, talking therapies are important. You know, it is important that the people in the room with vulnerable people have the right skills, are able to handle whatever comes in through the door, particularly in private practice, because you're not able, you know, someone who's setting up a private practice and is really keen for work is very unlikely to be doing a lot of filtering about, oh, I'm sorry, that's not right for me. You know I need to pay my mortgage, but, you know, that's outside my scope of practice. You know, we have very strong recommendations around how we see the career journey going, and we think that the PACFA registration is robust because it needs to be. So those high standards are key to our vision of counselling, which is where counsellors are employed in all the places where they should be employed. Now, depending on your exposure to the sector, it may surprise you or not to know that counsellors are not employed in all those locations in every state in the country. They are employed as some of them, some of the time. A lot of it depends on the management, it depends on the policy, it depends on what's happening in that environment. And, you know, we are very cognizant of the challenges faced by counsellors and psychotherapists out there. And that's why we're working so hard behind the scenes to create a structure towards them, because we know what those other organisations have and how we can match them. And we also are speaking to the funders in these spaces, and we hear what they're telling us. You know, they've been telling us something for quite a while, and, you know, we have been really receptive to that, and we are really taking that feedback on board. And so that is one of the reasons why we have national standards coming through, which I'm also happy to talk more about at the end. But the reality is that I certainly believe that that employers and government have had a lack of confidence in the counselling profession because they're not quite sure what they're going to get. You know, it's like those Bertie many flavoured beans. You know, you can put your hand in and chances are you get something great, but if you get something that tastes like earwax, you're never going to try again. You know, so it's really important for healthcare that you have a consistent level of qualification, consistent level of skills. And so one of the things that PACFA is doing at the moment is shifting from a qualification measurement to a competency measurement. And that will take a while, and it will be a complex piece of work, and we're going to be well informed by the competencies developed by the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, who we have formally sought recognition from, so that we can look at some of their materials. But when we have competencies, eventually that will be what all the accreditation runs off as well, because at the end of the day, that is the best way of measuring skill and making sure that we can meet those quality and safety requirements. And so we're really excited about the national standards. The latest news on that has been that a consultant is being appointed at the moment. They will get started, they will run a consultation process. We're hoping for a draft report by mid-year, which we will then feed into, and then the expectation is to be signed off by the minister next year. And this is, you know, let's be pragmatic here. This is not about us. COVID showed that there was a massive demand for counselling services, and the psychology workforce can't meet it. And the counselling workforce has not been in a position where it was as well utilised as it should have been. So the government is excited about the opportunity to work with us in this space. This is a window of opportunity. It will not last forever. You know, we can't mess around with this. You know, we are really keen to hear what the government's got to say about, I mean, the national standards are not going to be mandated on anyone, or they're not going to force anyone to do anything. This is my general understanding of it. What they will do is they will set a standard that says the government thinks that to work in a government service or to receive a rebate from government, this is the minimum level of standard of qualifications that you should have. So people will have a choice how they respond to that. But that's fair enough. That's the government's money after all, you know, and they're the ones who end up on the front page of the Herald Sun if something goes wrong. So we think it's a really good move. In my opinion, without any kind of secret information that has come through, in my opinion, it is likely that they will prioritise tertiary qualified counsellors, because that is the same as every other part of the allied health workforce that they are currently employing and using. So, but we will have to see exactly how that is. Okay, so if anyone would like to, they can scan that code there, and that will take hopefully straight through to the right page of the website. So you can do that at any point. It's on the next few slides. Our student membership is free. It's on our website. It provides free insurance for placements. It provides access to our online academic journal. It provides access to both the low-cost PD, but also the free webinars, which are available on our website. And it also provides access to an online community, which is about to open, which will basically a forum, but one in which people get information. In the first case about registration, do I apply? What do I need? What does it look like? But we're also aiming to set up resources for early careers, for connecting people with other members, talking about practice, talking about PD, really taking advantage of that kind of wealth of knowledge that our members have. It's also a really good way of just getting into the zone. You know, you get the newsletter every month that has the opportunities in it, most of which are open to students, access to the jobs board, access to our good practice guides. We've got a fantastic one that's going to the board at the moment about key documents for setting up private practice. You know, what does an intake form look like? What's the privacy policy? How do I make this all come together? So we're aiming to do more and more of that, kind of providing useful content for members. And by joining PACFA, you show that you are committed to the high standards of the profession and that you are valuing your counselling skills and education. Yes, you do still need to create a website, create an account to join the website. It's a little bit annoying, but you know, there's not any major process behind that. It's just how the website is set up. So you just create an account. Use your personal email and complete the application form, and you should just get that turned around quickly. Just touching on PACFA, because it's a good resource for anyone who has to provide written responses to anything. I'm sure it would be very well appreciated in the references of any essays. PACFA has been around since 2012 and reflects PACFA's commitment to research, and it's got a whole lot of pieces in there, including a new section called Viewpoint, which really aims to capture the voice of leaders in the sector. And we've got some really interesting stats coming through in relation to quality control and the findings of healthcare commissioners in relation to counselling that we're going to put up onto PACFA in the next couple of months. So I encourage you to just kind of keep your eye on it. Okay, so my standards, I think I've probably said that to you enough. Led by a board of volunteers, you could all be on the board today. If you know, like this, it's. I often say people don't become counsellors for money or prestige. They do it because they're committed to helping people. And indeed, volunteering with PACFA is a way of helping the profession, you know, in just as much in a different lens. So we really value our volunteers. We are aiming to increase recognition of the advanced skills in counselling. I think that piece has been very missing in this profession more broadly. We are aiming to, well, we do bring our people together, but we are aiming to do more and more of that this year, particularly online. And we are talking to people about counselling constantly. You know, those conversations are really important. Even today, you know, it was so good to be talking to professors and policy leaders and economists, and like so many exciting conversations are happening about allied health, making sure that counselling is in there, that counselling is not considered as an other. It's not a lesser profession over here. It's not like psychology that it's not like a version of psychology that the psychologist didn't want to do. It's not, you know, it's not a nice conversation and a cup of tea. You know, counselling is meaningful and substantive and important, and being an allied health profession is a key part of that. So keeping it in that area is a key part of my job. Okay, I think that's it.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, of course, thank you to Johanna, and also to Vicky for some really rich, wonderful information-packed presentations. So I think now we might open up for some questions. Yeah?
Yeah, I've got a few.
I might, Vicky, if you want to come up here, I can probably how to answer. You know, just go out.
For you as well. Should I stay here or do you want me to go?
Yeah, because I think they'll be, so I'll ask them. I'm going to assume our online attendees can hear me asking the question. So Eliza has got two questions. Does PACFA work in association with the NDIS?
Everyone works in association with the NDIS. It's a monolith that is a tremendous step forward for disability care, but also a really fundamentally innovative funding model. Yes, so we speak to them regularly. They're a very, very big organisation, and they're going to find it really hard to refine their service to meet everyone's expectations, but counsellors are definitely in there.
Paul has asked, if this is non-for-profit but government supported, then why isn't this free for counsellors?
I don't think I said it was government supported. Government, possibly, was Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So just trying to work out where to start. So all health professionals have to be registered. It is a legal requirement. There are a range of allied health professionals for which registration is optional. But I think the question is, do you take your work seriously? If you're not registered, then if someone comes in to see you and something goes wrong, they have no right of complaint. Now, that might be fine if you're a hairdresser. But if you're providing a health service, you are working under a code of ethics, and that person is entitled to be able to seek explanation, clarification, and support. So, this goes back to that idea of registration. PACFA is a regulatory body for counselling. And like, it's quite interesting because pharmacy, for example, has APRA, and then it has 3 different membership bodies, and some people belong to all of them. Counselling has a couple of membership bodies, but we also do membership and registration. Psychology has APRA registration and 2 membership bodies. So I think sometimes people coming into counselling don't seem to have been informed that they're joining a health profession and that health is serious business. And that goes back to the underlying need for kind of community safety.
Vicky, this might be for you. Eliza has asked, what are experiential therapies?
Sorry,
She wants to know, what are experiential therapies?
experiential, do you think?
Yes,
So I think
yeah,
I think that's mixing up two things. We have a we teach experiential, practical, hands-on courses. So experiential therapies, it's using the skills we teach.
Yes,
think that's-
possibly. My response would be possibly, there are a range of counsellors and psychotherapists who work with clients in deep, meaningful ways that involve other skills and techniques that they learn. And they range from, variations of art therapy, equine therapy,
So the
band
expressive
therapy, expressive therapy. So that would be my
Yeah.
take. And that's a core part of, generally speaking, advanced therapy, advanced practice in psychotherapy.
Kayleen has asked, is it true that government organisations will fund masters in counselling?
I'm not a government organisation, so I don't know. I do know that,
Fund masters.
I'm just asking, is there in here, is it true that government orgs will fund masters in counselling?
Well, speaking for ACAP, our masters is not masters by research. It is usually the masters by research that don't attract government CPS. So, but ours is not a masters by research. So I think it's like masters by research, PhD, you don't pay HECS, but masters by coursework, you do.
and so that makes sense, because at least I was thinking like from an employer point of view, and I was
Oh,
like, oh, okay.
We look at it differently.
Yeah.
So we'll get to the answer.
Well, I think, yeah, so, it depends on the masters and depends on the government department, but certainly there's a lot more nuance to that question.
Yes.
Mia's asked a question which is also very popular. I noticed recently positions advertised on the PACFA site for government positions. People only holding bachelor and masters in counselling to apply. Has the grad diploma in counselling been demoted through PACFA and now not recognised as highly?
Well, it certainly hasn't been demoted by PACFA. However, there is a trend in the broader health sector which is moving towards masters. And I would say that we fought against that for a very, very long time. We're 25 years this year, and we still recognise people's graduate diplomas as registrants for PACFA, but we can't force employers to do anything else. So what I would say is that the allied health profession is moving in a professionalising way, just as you used to be able to get into a computer job with a diploma, and now you need a bachelor or a master's. We're seeing that same increase in expectations around study occurring, and PACFA has been fighting the good fight, and we will continue to fight that. However, we do serve our members, and if the time comes that the national standards come in at that level, and that represents the best opportunity for our members, then we will be talking to them about that.
And we've got a few international students online, and they're asking how they are able to join or become a member of PACFA if they're an international student that's studying with us.
As an international student, you can still join as a student. It's still free. It's the same process. And we do have some international registrants as well.
I'll ask one more question and then we'll move to the campus guys here. Michelle's asked, is there any way PACFA clinical registration can be expedited from the 5 to 6 week timeframe, particularly if a job is pending?
We get hundreds of applications, and our process is very heavy on that front end vetting. And so there are good reasons why it takes as long as it does. My best advice would be, if you really need it quickly, contact the office, be very nice to the office staff, and see if there's something that they can do to expedite that for you. But it would be on a very rare case by case basis.
Does anyone have any questions here? So I've got quite a few online, but I'd like to give you guys the opportunity if you. No?
I do. So as we see the government sort of recognise counsellors more and more, do you think that we're going to start to see a shift in the way that psychologists are required for diagnosis to counsellors requiring diagnoses as well? It will still be separate?
No, it's a different profession.
Yep.
And I think the government, certainly the current government, has a real respect for the diversity of practice and the values of counselling, like the philosophy of counselling. And it fits a very different niche from psychology. And the government has really realised they need that. I mean, when it comes down to it, every review of Better Access shows that a lot of the people who are accessing those services actually want counselling. They don't necessarily need diagnosis. That's not an appropriate response for them. So I think we're in a really good position for that to work. I mean, as I said previously, when I said something about being pragmatic, it's not just counselling either. The government is quite keen to improve access to a broad range of allied health services for people who need it. So I'm hoping that we will come in through that door at the same time as those other professions. And those other professions are, you know, also have a more holistic, humanistic approach to care. So we're not going to be, I anticipate, the only profession fighting the good fight. It's actually going to be a much more dynamic, well, a shift towards a much more dynamic system. I shouldn't promise major changes to Medicare. That would be beyond my power. But that's what in the policy paradigm, you know, that is what they're talking about. They're talking about a much more person-centered approach, one that aligns with counselling very, very well.
Vicky, this might be for you. Alex, her bachelor at ACAP in Sydney in 2011. She's asking, should I be upgraded to a master's?
That is her personal, dependent on her circumstances, but a master's will always be a more attractive qualification because it's 2 AQF levels higher. So if she can, definitely, and it's just advancing her skills, about taking her existing knowledge to a deeper level. So a master's will always be very attractive. Having said that, you can work with a bachelor. So it's really personal circumstances and where she wants to go with her career.
A couple of people have commented on this question. My goal is to have a private practice in future. Do I have to be registered with PACFA or ACA or both?
You just have to be registered somewhere. You know, you don't have to be registered with both, although we do have people who are registered with both because they see both organisations as having different benefits and different philosophies, and they want to make sure that they have exposure to all of it. Yeah, so, you know, I think the most important thing is for me to make it really clear that people do need to be registered, because I do think that without fundamental registration, it's very, very hard to advocate for the sector more broadly.
I'm not sure if either of you will be able to answer this. Tanya has asked, I recently read an article that in Victoria, counsellors were going to be able to work in schools without having to have a teaching degree. Do you know if this will happen in other states or is this a state government's decision?
Clearly it's a state government decision, but that's quite a nice win that we've been talking to the Victorian government about. We're seeing growth and opportunities with other Victorian government departments that are looking at similar kinds of opportunities for counsellors. So there is like really, you know, good green roots of development there. What I would say is that the national standards are the best chance for us to see consistency nationally, because because the departments of education in each state and territory will be consulted as part of the national standards, and there really will be very little reason apart from parochial bias for a state to say, well, no, in our area, we're going to use a different standard. It won't happen overnight. State government's not that organised. But if you look across the sector more broadly, I would say it will become, whatever the national standard is, it will become an equalising baseline requirement, you know, that will apply for most things most of the time.
And Katie has asked, she's currently with ACA, but she got her PACFA approval for membership last year. However, she's wanting to know if she can still join with a degree in psychology and can I still join with a degree in psychology and grad diploma in counselling? Is this still recognised?
So a graduate diploma in counselling is recognised, so the offer would still stand. So yeah, but I'm not. I should point out I'm the CEO. Membership questions are best tackled by the membership team because often there's nuances in transcripts or curriculum or placement that I'm not privy to in relation to that particular application.
Vicky, one for you or possibly you, Joanna. A question regarding the growing space of AI and how counselling is likely to be impacted as a practice moving forward.
I'll start with the academic journey to become a counsellor, and we're recognising that AI is here to stay. So we are adjusting to that in two ways. One, our assessment tasks are becoming very more personal reflections, the type of things that AI could not possibly interpret. But also, having said that, we recognise it's here, so there has to be ethical use of AI and acknowledgement of the use of AI. That's the stance that we're moving towards. In terms of as a counsellor, look, I couldn't imagine it writing your notes, or might paraphrase your notes, but because notes are quite personal things. Plus, there's that whole confidentiality issue that you cannot be putting client information out there to have AI rephrase it. And that will be a huge ethical issue that I know already people are using AI on things that are quite confidential and that shouldn't be released, because nothing is safe once it gets out there. So I think it's watch this space, how we use AI ethically now that it's here.
We actually had quite a lot of discussion about this in our membership because it's an interesting topic. And I anticipate that it's one of the things that will probably come up in the forums when they're moving. And, we will all be watching the space to see how things emerge and move through. Personally, I think we're underestimating how complex people are if we think that AI can actually replace significant therapeutic support provided by a counsellor. I'm not saying that it can't have a place in some areas, and I certainly, that would not be my call anyway. I did hear a really clever analysis of it, which has stuck with me, which is that AI will not replace people, but people who can use AI will replace people who can't use AI. And I thought that it's a tool, and
Yeah, I think that's it. It's a tool, and we have to learn to use it in a people way that assists but doesn't take away the knowledge that you have and the knowledge that you've spent a long time learning. So it's going so rapidly.
Thanks, Vicky. Did you have a question or? No, oh, I was trying to put your hand up. A couple of people are asking about the actual membership. Student membership runs for 6 months. How do you reinstate after that? I've just started my master's, and a similar one is, how long does it last for? And if it's only a few years, what membership do you get?
Okay.
You're not a student anymore.
So student membership runs for the life of your course. And it may not look like that because we have a financial year membership, but if you are still a student, you will be renewed at that student level. As a student, you are not able to practice outside of placement. So it is not a shortcut to registration. It is a different, unique category of engagement. Upon finishing your course, you would then apply for registration through our website. You'd speak to our membership team, you'd supply all your documentation, you provide your criminal history check, as I mentioned earlier, working with children if you were going to work in that space. And you would then become a certified practicing counsellor. We don't have provisional registration. Counselling registration is not provisional. All counsellors are fully registered once they are registered. In that first year, we do have a 25% discount of registration to help people kind of get started. And it's a good reason to ask for that. I think that's eligible for the first 2 or 3 years. You can only have it once, but anytime in your first 2 or 3 years, you can take advantage of that discount. And then basically we have 2 levels of membership. And they are not based on your qualification. Everyone is registered equally. They are based on your experience. So the certified practicing counsellor category is, whilst you accrue your first 750 hours of client contact, effectively 3 years. Often kind of takes people 2 to 3 years to kind of do that. And then after that, registered clinical counsellor status. And then anything beyond that, including the registered clinical psychotherapist, is related to membership of one of the colleges. And that's where the special college accreditation kicks in. And we have a creative and experiential therapies college, a psychotherapy college, a relationship counselling college. And so that's, those are different places where your kind of advanced practice and advanced training can be accredited and utilised.
And just a couple of questions about what is the cost?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's $426, which is actually very reasonable if you were to look at other professions in relation to the kinds of things that we're talking about when you're looking at access to things. Also keep in mind that registration with PACFA includes access to all that CPD. So you don't need to also join another CPD company, which is often a kind of hidden cost that people don't consider. And people can join at different points of the year, but then it all just rounds up to the 1st of July. That's when it all kind of catches up. We also have a really good relationship with our insurance company who provide a really robust insurance product for PACFA members. It's probably the best in the sector at a really good price that covers modalities and experiential work.
I have a question. So if your course is accredited, if your master's is accredited by PACFA, how much time does it usually take for us to get registered?
About 4 weeks at the moment.
So like after completing my.
Yeah. So you need to have all your paperwork together. One of the reasons why it can take longer than that is because there's a lot of back and forth. No, we need a transcript. No, we need this, but the information is all on the website, and we are aiming to revamp our application form this year and make it all a bit easier. Take about 4 weeks.
So the registration, when you register like counsellor with PACFA, so how long does the registration last?
Well, then the registration is for the financial year. So then, so what happens then is at the start of May, we start emailing everyone and we say, please upload your CPD records to the website, upload your supervision requirements. And then you kind of go through 4 or 5 steps and tick a box and you pay your fees for the next year, basically. And of course, we're a membership organisation. So, if you need to take a leave of absence, if you're going off an extended holiday, travelling overseas, having a baby, life things happen. And it's perfectly okay to call us up and say, what policy applies to this? What do I need to do? And we're, aim to be very helpful.
Just on that, Liz she's reframed her membership question. Is the student membership free throughout my time as a student?
Yes.
And Michelle has asked, can you explain the difference in requirements between a registered clinical counsellor versus a registered clinical psychotherapist?
Okay, this gets a little bit tricky because it's getting into that advanced practice area. So all members of PACFA have to register as a counsellor. So you have to, you've done one of the accredited courses or you've done a non-accredited course and we've checked the curriculum and you've done the criminal history check and you've met all the other, bits and pieces. And so everyone comes in as a counsellor. If you then want to join the College of Psychotherapy, you need to meet the College of Psychotherapy's requirements. There is a particular training standard that covers this. It's based on the evidence from Europe. And anyone who's worked in the UK or in other parts of Europe would know that the esteem that psychotherapists are held in over there is significantly different to here. Though there's a really strong culture of appreciating psychotherapy. There's a number of courses that people do. They take 7 years. You can't apply to start them until you're in your late 20s. There's a whole range of peer networks and engagement and research that supports the psychotherapy profession in those settings. Now, Australia is not in that place. And certainly the fact that a whole lot of people frequently talk about psychotherapy just being a counsellor probably hasn't helped that. We don't say that. What we say is that to be a registered clinical psychotherapist, you need to meet the requirements of the College of Psychotherapy. We're not saying that necessarily other people aren't doing psychotherapy, but in order to have people understand a profession, you have to quantify. The requirements for the college are effectively 450 hours of specialty study in a psychotherapy, and we can help people identify what modalities are eligible for that and what's possible, because we have good relationships through our member associations with the advanced psychotherapy trainers. And as well as that, it's significant commitment to personal therapy, because psychotherapists, that's a specialty for them that makes their practice quite unique, and also supervision by a psychotherapist. So we encourage people to get registered as a counsellor and to build their career through CPD, to use our cheap, our low cost, sounds better, CPD courses, to watch some webinars, to attend a weekend course, to talk to psychotherapists, to get a really good understanding of what's possible in that space, and then to basically build up a portfolio of work and training that enables them to meet the college requirements. And in fact, we just had a CPD earlier this week on somatic psychotherapy, which was run by a European psychotherapist who is a friend of our college's convener. They meet up at the international conferences, and he's got fantastic international networks. And that was huge, very, very well attended. Very, very popular with our members, great feedback, and it's now available free as a recording on our website for members.
Thank you. Fit these last few questions in. Brooke has asked, this might be for you, Vicky, does the Masters at ACAP meet the requirements for registering as a clinical psychotherapist?
No, it's an entry point. As Johanna just explained, it takes a lot more. Our Masters doesn't include personal therapy for a start. It gives students an entry, a taste. And then if they choose to go on and specialise, exactly as Johanna was talking about, the schools.
Which I think just answered Michelle's question. So the ACAP Masters of Counselling and Psychotherapy alone doesn't automatically qualify.
No.
And so that's not to devalue the psychotherapy experience that is gained in the Masters.
You have to start
but
somewhere.
It's a small component, whereas we aim to have a specialist workforce that has substantial experience and training in these areas.
Okay.
The room's telling us that.
I think it's home time.
I think I'll close off the questions.
Very, very, very short. So thank you again, Johanna and Vicky, for just wonderful, wonderful information tonight. That now brings us to the end of the event. So I'd like to thank our guest speakers and Cassie as well, who's been our little voiceover in the corner there, and our attendees. And we look forward to seeing you at another industry and alumni event very soon. Thank you. Thanks.